Are Christians commanded to support the nation of Israel? This is a very common view. It recently came up in this viral interview that I'm going to show you. So we'll think about it. We'll look at the scriptures that are used to justify that. And then we'll look at two scriptures that I think are more helpful in shaping how we view the situation in Israel. So here it is. This is Ted Cruz. He's a US Senator. He was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. You might recognize him. And what he says about Israel, I think, is reflective of what a lot of people think. So we're gonna look at it and see like the basis for why he thinks this.
Reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis, but... So you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. You don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two...
Hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
the
God's referring to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected...
He's the prime minister.
Right.
What?
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle is there.
Silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
You
believe
Israel. That's what God was talking about in Genesis.
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Okay. Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is. So I don't know if we can...
I don't remember the scriptural citation. But, okay,
It's like Genesis 16 or something like that. But yes, it's in the earlier part of the book. But the point is...
All right, Tucker, you keep interrupting me before I finish my sentence.
It's important to know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're... So you're saying as a Christian, if I believe in Jesus, I have to support the modern state of Israel?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm explaining for me what my motivation is.
Okay, we'll cut it there. I don't want to this doesn't come from a place where I'm like, oh, either of these parties is like so dumb and so stupid, and I'm going to tell you why they're awful and why I'm right. I think there is stuff to be respected and applauded in both sides. I respect that Ted Cruz was like, oh, I don't know the exact citation, but take out your phone and Google it. That's a really helpful thing we can do. And the fact that he was like, oh, it says in the Bible, I believe it. Whenever it's oversimplified, whenever you don't really understand what it's actually saying, it's not helpful. But I guess that attitude of I am just going to believe the Bible, I respect that. I'm not trying to dunk on either of these people. I just think it's really helpful to have clarity about what the Bible actually says. So let's have a little look. Tucker Carlson, fair play to him, he was like, oh, I think it's Genesis 16 is what you're referencing. I actually think it's Genesis 12 and 15. We're going to have a little look at those. So this is Genesis chapter 12. This is where God appears to Abraham, who becomes Abraham in Genesis 15. God makes these promises to him, and the promises are threefold. You can see them here. My Old Testament lecture at uni broke them down into, he called it seed, land, and blessing. So seed is the descendants. There are connotations back to Genesis chapter 3, the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent, and then that Hebrew word goes the whole way through the Old Testament. It's really significant, but it's not super clear in English, like seed, what's that about? So it gets translated. It says in verse 2, I'll make of you a great nation. So that's number one, great nation. In chapter 15, that's when God is like, look up at the stars, and as many stars as there are, that's how many descendants I'm going to give you. So we've got the seed. I will bless you and make your name great. That's the blessing section, so that you'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I'll curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That, I think, is where this theology comes from of I've got to support and bless Israel. And then we see down in verse 6, pass through the land of Canaan. And verse 7, the Lord appears to Abraham, to your offspring I will give this land. So you've got the seed, the land, and the blessing. Those are the promises given to Abraham, and that I think is where this theology comes from of, we have to support and bless Israel as a nation. However, just on thinking sort of logically about this across the Bible, it can't mean that you must support Israel in everything they do, because much of the Bible, like the prophets, are the prophets opposing the leadership of Israel and saying to the nation of Israel, you've forsaken God and God's going to curse you. So just like on that point, I think that sort of weakens it a little bit. And then whenever we get into the New Testament, particularly Paul's letters, we see that actually it's not really what Ted Cruz and people like him who believe that, it's not really what they think. So let's have a look in the New Testament. Now, whenever we get into Galatians chapter 3, this is one of the areas where we see that Paul takes the idea of Israel, like the people of God, the covenant people of God who receive the promises of God. He takes that idea and applies it to the church. We see this as he talks about like Abraham. It says in verse 6 of Galatians 3, Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. It was by belief in the promises of God that Abraham was made right with God. And so the promises of God culminate in Jesus. And then Paul says, whoever believes in Jesus becomes an inheritor of those promises. He says, it's those, verse 7, those of faith who are the sons of Abraham. It very much downplays genealogical descent and sort of lifts up the idea that we can be, people who are not Jewish can be welcomed in and brought into the Jewish faith, because that was the plan all along. Throughout the Old Testament, the promise is that, okay, God says to Abraham, I'm going to give you these three things, the seed, land, and blessing. But the idea is that through you, the whole world would be blessed. You will be the conduit for blessing and for bringing the rest of the world into a right relationship with me. It's sort of like a paraphrase of what God is saying. And we see there, look, Paul in verse 8 directly quotes Genesis chapter 12. It says, Scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying like the gospel message is, in you shall all the nations be blessed. So Abraham was the forefather of Jesus. Jesus is the conduit by which the whole world is blessed. And so if we have faith in Jesus, then we're connected to him and we're brought into those promises. We're brought into that storyline of what God is doing in the world. So there's not a distinction of like Israel and the church. For Paul, the church is the true Israel. And so then to say that we are commanded to bless the current nation of Israel, it makes a distinction between the church and Israel that the New Testament doesn't support. It comes out of the like theological underpinning of this is like an end times or world history understanding of scripture and stuff called dispensationalism. I'm not going to get into that too much. Redeemed Zoomer, if you know his YouTube channel or whatever, he's got a good video on that. You can check it out. So hopefully that helps you understand that biblically there's no command to support the nation of Israel, because in New Testament language, the church, global, like capital C, the global church is the new Israel. But there are still some scriptures that I just want to really quickly look at that have helped me understand how I'm looking at this whole thing. Gavin Ortland recently, in his video on this thing, he pointed out how the way that we should be looking at this is through the biblical principles of justice and wisdom. I think that's really helpful. I'm going to show you two passages that I think reflect that. The first is James chapter 1, verse 19. This is so good. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And it goes on, says, why the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. We are often the opposite. We are often slow to listen, slow to speak, slow to listen, quick to speak, quick to become angry. And we are often the opposite. I think that we are slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to become angry. And social media really incites and even I think incentivizes this, because how many videos do you see of like I for example, I could have made this video be like Ted Cruz just like destroying Ted Cruz's rubbish theology or whatever, and that would get a lot of views, that would get a lot of clicks. I don't want to do that because that feeds into this of being slow to listen, quick to speak, quick to become angry. I think we need to slow down and take time to like assess things and think about things, not in the heat of immediate anger, but like have a little bit of distance and space to think and to pray about things. And I think this is helpful for me. This is the like wisdom category. How can I think about this particular war and other wars? How can I think about this wisely? And for me, I've personally found it a little overwhelming, the deluge of information and misinformation around everything that's happened in Israel, Gaza, Palestine. Just like one example of that, I remember hearing about the hospital that was bombed in Gaza, where civilians were taking refuge, and everyone said it was Israel, it was an Israeli strike. And then all of these independent investigations later found out that actually it was probably Hamas. But big names like the New York Times and other places, I think, had reported this as an Israeli attack. So then you have people flocking to social media, sharing these wee infographics and sharing all these wee posts and saying genocide this, genocide that. And actually, there's so much information, there's so much misinformation. I've got to be really slow to develop an opinion and an understanding of this before I just rush off in anger and speak and not actually listen carefully. The second one, this is on the justice framework that Gavin Orland was like, wisdom and justice, those are the ways that we want to think about this. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. The people I've read on this, like Bible Project, Matt Whitman, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the consensus seems to be that the righteousness that's being talked about here, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, it's not like personal righteousness so much as it is like right relationships in the world, like a rightness in the world for things to not be broken and messed up and evil. And for me, ever since like COVID, I sort of stopped watching the news because I was like, this is just so difficult and depressing and it's weighing me down hearing all this awful news all the time. And I think that was helpful, but it is possible to go too far with that, I think, and to sort of bury our head in the sand and pretend that none of these awful things are happening in the world. There's a healthy balance. That balance might vary from person to person, but for me, I think I'm becoming more aware of the fact that I can't bury my head in the sand, but that it's okay to look out into the world and see the brokenness and see the pain and not just like internalize that and spiral into like existential dread and nihilism, but actually to bring that to God in prayer and to be like, God, can you just move in a way that brings righteousness here, that brings peace? It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Hunger and thirst are such visceral things. And Jesus is saying here, like, whenever you really feel like just that burden of like, I just want peace, I want wholeness, I want right relations between people. Whenever you feel that as a visceral thing, then you will be satisfied. Be satisfied because you are in line with how God views these things, I think. But then also you will eventually ultimately be satisfied someday whenever God makes all war cease and whenever he fixes all of the broken things in the world. Yep, those are the scriptures that are helping me. I hope that cleared things up for you and helps you understand the whole thing. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you soon. God bless.